Before attempting to disassemble any firearm, you should always ensure it's clear. We've already done this previously, but let's practice. Remember, the AR-15 needs to remain on safe throughout this process. There's no specific order to follow, but some parts will have to be removed before others. Now, before we begin, let's talk about some parts that'll be helpful. You may notice that I'm using some good rubber gloves. It may kind of seem like a silly thing to do, but it's a good habit to get into. Weapons accumulate a lot of dirt and lead. We want to kind of avoid getting that lead into our system because it'll accumulate in our fatty tissue. So gloves are always a good habit to be in. I also use a good push tool, which this is just an M4 takedown tool. You can find these in Brunel's or a lot of different places online. I also use a magnetic tool pad that I found at a local hardware store, which is great. You also see I'm kind of prepping my area. I've got a nice hard plastic cover below so that I don't ruin my table with any solvents that I'm going to eventually use, and I'm not marring up my surface. And I've got a few rags around here just in case I need to wipe some things down. Now, you see I've got a sling attached. Okay, it may be useful to go ahead and remove this sling at this time. You could leave it attached, but it's not really necessary. So I'm going to go ahead and take it off. And I'm just going to set this off to the side. Now, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take my punch tool, and I'm going to place it on the takedown pins that secure the upper receiver to the lower receiver. Now notice, I'm not going to stab or bang at this. I'm going to place the takedown tool on the pin, and then I'm going to tap it through. And then I'm going to follow the same procedure on the other side. Just that little bit of pressure is all that I need. Now, I'm going to separate the upper and the lower receiver. Now, what I like to do is go ahead and start with a section and then stay with it. I'm going to go ahead and remove my buttstock. You're going to have to follow your manufacturer's recommendations for your buttstock. There may be certain procedures, like this mag pull, that can be a little tricky to take off. Now I set that off to the side. Notice I'm keeping my parts grouped in an area where it makes sense to me. Now, I have an Accu wedge stuck in here, so I'm going to go ahead and take that out. Now, I'm going to go ahead and remove the buffer from the buffer tube. I'm going to do that by placing the takedown pin on the retaining pin, pressing it down while I hold pressure on the buffer with my thumb. If you don't hold pressure here and capture it, it can shoot off across the room. Now I can just pull it cleanly out, just give it a little wiggle. There. Now I'm going to go ahead and separate the buffer from the buffer spring and set that down. Now, my lower receiver is finished, so I can set that off to the side. Now, I'm going to go ahead and work on my upper receiver. What I like to do is go ahead and set my rifle just like this. If you've got fixed front sights, I'd like to have them folded down. If you can't and they're sticking out, you may want to put a rag underneath them because you don't want to damage them. Now, all I'm going to do at this point is lightly grasp the charging handle, unlock it, and pull it slightly to the rear. You notice this unlocks the bolt. Now I'm going to switch to the bolt, and I'm just going to easily slide that out. Now I can go ahead and set this down, and then I'm going to pull the charging handle and slightly wiggle it up and rotate it out. Now, for our portion right here, I'm done with the upper receiver, so I can set this off to the side. I'm also done with the charging handle. That can go away. Now, I'm going to work on the bolt carrier. Now, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and remove the firing pin retainer. And that's going to come out easily. And I can place this on my magnetic mat to keep it. Then I'm going to take my bolt carrier, invert it, and give it a little tap. The firing pin should fall out, and I'm going to go ahead and set that down on my magnetic mat. Now, the next thing that I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to take this metal lug here and rotate it 90 degrees. That way the long portion is in line with the bolt. Then, all I'm going to do is tilt it and tap it, and it falls out. I'm going to go ahead and take that and set it down. Now, my bolt will remove from the bolt carrier. Bolt carrier is done. Now, I need to go ahead and remove my extractor from my bolt. Now, you never want to use your firing pin for this. You could use a pin, but your firing pin retainer works great for this. Now, note where I'm going to place my thumb. I'm going to place my thumb right here. And that's because underneath there's a spring. This pin is held in place simply by spring tension underneath. So to get it to slide out easily, I'm going to press down and overcome that spring tension. Then I'm going to go ahead and push the pin out with my firing pin retainer, and it comes out easily. And now I can separate my extractor from the bolt. You can see here the spring that I'm talking about and why I was pressing there. This is as far as you need to break down your rifle. From here, we're going to go on to cleaning. Alright, so now we're ready to clean and maintain your weapon. Even if you just bought your weapon, you should go ahead and clean it before its first use. Some weapons could have some packing grease that isn't designed to be fired with the weapon. Always follow your manufacturer's recommendations as far as break-in procedures and cleaning go. Now, let's talk about some pieces of equipment that I like to have on hand to clean my weapon. First, I like to be outdoors in a well-ventilated area because I'm going to be using solvents and aerosols. Again, I've got my table protected. I've got a nice hard cover here that's protecting my table. I've got rags, my magnetic mat, my weapon's disassembled. Again, I'm wearing gloves. It's good to get a nice set of good disposable rubber gloves from your hardware store that are designed to be used with chemicals, because you are going to be using chemicals. Also, eye protection. It sounds silly, and a lot of people like to blow it off. However, you are going to be spraying aerosols. These things don't mix well with your eyes. And there's two portions of your body that won't heal if you damage them. It's your eyes and your hearing. So make sure you protect them. Now, over here, I've got a nice coated metal paint tray. I like to use this to catch a lot of my solvents that I use, and it works pretty well. I've got my rubber gloves. I've also got some good outdoor hand wipes. The reason I'm using outdoor hand wipes, and I'm not just going to go to the bathroom and wash my hands off, is again, weapons accumulate lead. I don't want to bring that lead into my house. So after I'm done cleaning, I'll go ahead and wipe my hands off, get good and clean out here, and then just throw it in the trash when I'm done. So I'm not tracking in that lead for my wife and kids and family. Alright, again, I've got some more rags here. Now here, we've got a standard GI issue cleaning kit. It comes with segmented cleaning rods. These things are great. They really should be a part of your regular range kit, just in case you have some failure to extracts. They're not ideal for rodding out your barrel because the rods aren't coated. So I prefer not to use them. But I still keep them in my kit for range use. Now, I've got a really nice coated rod that's just for rodding my barrel. I like to get a good quality one that's got a nice coating on it, so there's no chance of scratching my barrel. You see, it's all brass and coatings. There's no metal portions whatsoever that are harder than my muzzle, barrel lining, or chamber, so I'm not going to scratch things. These are real nice to have. Then, over here, I've got the standard 5.56 millimeter cleaning brush. You do need these for your barrel. Make sure that you get one that's chambered for your rifle. Also, these things do wear out, so when you see the metal portions of the brushes start to flatten, you need to get a new one. Next is a chamber brush. You'll notice it's got a bimetal compound. We've got brass and steel brushes. These are designed to clean different areas of inside of the chamber. This is another very, very important item. A lot of times I see students out on the range that start to get a lot of failure to extracts. Usually when I go into their cleaning kit or ask them if they have one of these, I kind of get a blank stare. And it's because you get a lot of carbon buildup in the chamber that gets those cartridges stuck. So you want to use this. Same thing, these brushes will wear down and you will want to replace them. Now, got a bore snake. These things are really nice and easy to have, if you just need an emergency swap. There's some drawbacks with it. You don't always know if your barrel's completely clean, like you do with patches, but it's quick and easy to use. Another thing, these can be a little uncomfortable to pull through the barrel because you're basically wrapping string and pulling. And there can be quite a bit of resistance when you first pull it through on a dirty barrel. One thing I like to do is take a magazine, and what you can do is just wrap it around itself a few times so it forms a bite, and then use it as a handle to pull. And it's quite a bit more comfortable. So this is something that I don't use often, but if I'm kind of restricted on space and I want something that can just come with me, you can see that will very, very easily fit inside of a pouch, and it can make your weapons cleaning really quick and easy. Now some regular pipe cleaners. You can find these at your regular tobacco or craft shop. These are great for cleaning inside some of the recessed areas or gas parts. They're really good to have on hand. Now, good old-fashioned GI-issued four squares. I'm not a big fan of the round ones. I never figured out the origami method that you have to use to figure out the different calibers. If that works for you, that's great. I just prefer these old-fashioned four squares, and they work great. Now, let's go ahead and move on to some of these solvents that I use. One essential cleaner that you want to use, because you've invested some good money into a great quality rifle, and you want to care for the inside of that barrel, the lining. You want to get some good copper solvent, some bore cleaner. I like to use Shooter's Choice. There's a lot of other brands out there. The bottom line, you really need to get that copper jacketing outside of the lands and grooves. When you have a lot of buildup in there, it can really decrease the life of your barrel. So Shooter's Choice is a great one. You may notice I do have gun scrubber here. I do use gun cleaning compounds on my rifle. It's just easier. Using an air compressor to blow it off afterwards is even easier. You just need to make sure you don't blow your parts away. One note is make sure if you're using solvents to clean your weapon, use solvents that are designed for your weapon. Don't use gasoline. Don't use brake parts cleaner. They can excessively dry out the metal and damage the bluing of your weapon. So only use items that are designed. Now, I also have some CLP spray cleaner. I'm a big fan of the regular Army-issued brake-free CLP. It's really good stuff, regular oil. The spray stuff is pretty good. It foams and stays put quite a bit. So this is great. I do use only CLP cleaner. I don't like light oil, like REM oil, for a tactical rifle. They may be great for a competition pistol, but I'm only going to fire a few rounds before cleaning again. But I want something that's going to go ahead and break down all that carbon as I shoot and give me some good reliability. Lately, I've switched to this Rand CLP. I figured if Kyle Lamb liked it, then it'd be good enough for me. It's got some compounds that kind of get down inside of the metal and create a seal. I've shot this quite a bit, and I've been really impressed. I actually shot this rifle. There's fairly tight tolerances on it, and I've cranked through at least 4,000 rounds without re-cleaning, other than swabbing out the barrel, of course. And I haven't been able to hit a failure point. I've noticed it's quite a bit slicker with the stuff in. So gradually kind of making the switch to this. Feel free to try whatever cleaners are out there and lubes. There's a lot of them. Just try them and see what works for you. Now, over here again, I've still got my takedown tool. I'm going to use that quite a bit. I've got a chamber brush holder, so I don't have to pull out all of my cleaning rod sections. A lot of times the T-handle on the cleaning rod can spin on you when you try to clean out the chamber, so this is pretty handy, and it just fits my chamber brush. This is a specialized Leatherman MUT. It actually has some nice tools on it, like a takedown pin. It also has a scraper on it. It's made out of brass. You know, it's got a lot of neat tools. It's good for the range, and you can just clip it onto your belt if you want. It's got a rope cutter. If you're going to carry some sort of multi-tool on the range, you might as well carry one that'll help you out with your weapon. Now, general purpose brushes. The standard Army general purpose brush has got plastic bristles. You can use this to clean the large majority of your weapon. Otis makes a great kit that has a couple different versions. This is the same general purpose brush, but it's got some steel bristles. I'll use this on areas of the weapon where there's no bluing and there's no damage, no risk of me scratching the bluing. This is a great piece. Here's one with brass. I can use this on most parts. However, I usually stick with the plastic one. This is just a little bit softer in case there's some stubborn carbon buildup on an area that I don't want to scratch with the steel bits. This works great. So, a few great pieces here. Now, once you get all of your cleaning equipment set up, we'll go ahead and start cleaning our rifle. Now that we've gotten all of the pieces together that we're going to need to clean our weapon, it's time to go ahead and clean. It's good to do a last-minute check to make sure there's nothing here I want to expose to solvents, like my watch. So I'm going to go ahead and take that off right now and just set it off to the side. And I'm going to place on my eye protection. Now, what I like to do is I like to start with the dirtiest parts, because oftentimes they're going to need to soak a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and move my parts tray over to the center, and I'm going to start with the bolt. What I'm going to do is just hold it over here and just give it a little blast and rotate it around. You'll notice that most of the carbon comes right off. And my weapon is dirty because I just fired it, so this is a great time to clean it. And I can let it sit here. And I'm just going to keep working my way through all the parts, spraying them off, and let them soak. After all, we can just let the solvents do the work. You don't have to sit here and scrub them. Oftentimes, if you've got some stubborn carbon and you find that you need more than a plastic general purpose brush, you probably just need to let it soak a little bit longer. And I'm just getting it into all the little nooks and crannies, setting it back down. Now let's do the same thing with the charging handle. Your buffer really doesn't need to have any solvent on it. You can really just wipe this down and it's just fine. Let's set that off to the side. Sometimes you can get a little bit of gunk built up on the buffer string. Nothing wrong with spraying this down. And then I'm just going to give it a wipe. Set it on my magnetic mat. Now, for your buttstock, this is plastic, at least mine is, so generally I don't want to use any solvents on this. What I can do is I can just take a rag, use my chamber brush, and just push it down in here, and give it a good wipe. And there's nothing really wrong with that. And I'm going to set it off to the side. Your slings, if you've got some stubborn buildup on your slings, you can take your plastic general purpose brush and just brush it off. You really don't want to introduce any solvents to this because it's cloth and it can damage it. Same thing with your metal working parts. I'm just going to give this a brush off. A lot of times you can get some dirt buildup in here. And then just brush it off, and I'm going to set that off to the side. Now, I'm going to go ahead and take my lower receiver. This is actually really easy to clean. We don't usually get a lot of stubborn stuff built up in here. So I'm just going to go ahead and give the magazine well a little spray. Give the trigger assembly some spray. I do find that when I'm doing this, it's really not necessary for me to go ahead and ease the hammer forward. It gets most of the debris out. Comes right out. Same thing with the buffer tube. Give that a good hose down. You may notice I've got some paint on my rifle. It's kind of normal for regular paint to come off during the cleaning process. It's not a problem. There's more expensive coatings out there like Cerakote or Duracoat that are designed to stand up for this, but in the end, I'm not doing this to make my weapon look pretty. I'm just doing it to break up the pattern a little bit because black doesn't occur naturally in nature, so it makes things stand out. So I'm comfortable with this rubbing off. When it rubs off, I just repaint it. So I'm going to go ahead and set that down. Now, what I'd like to do before I start introducing any solvents into my upper receiver is I want to move my optics off. Some people can kind of be nervous about this because they worry about zero shift when you're taking off and putting on your optics, but it's fairly negligible. And again, this isn't a long distance rifle. I don't notice a whole lot of zero shift, and I should be confirming my zero on a regular basis anyways. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove my sight assemblies and my laser, and I'm going to set these off to the side, and I'm just going to go ahead and tuck in my cable here. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and invert my upper receiver, and I'm going to spray into the chamber. And you can just see the dirt come out. If I really wanted to, I could go ahead and put some down the barrel. There we go. And now I'm good with the solvent, so I'm going to place the cap back on. Now, while all these parts are soaking, I may give it a little bit extra. I'm going to go ahead and start rotting the barrel. So I'm going to set my tray back off to the side again. And just move some of these pieces that I'm not concerned with. And I'm going to go ahead and take my rod. And I'm going to take my shooter's choice. Now, what I like to do with this is I'll take the cap and I'll go ahead and fill it up a little bit. Just like that. And set it on a cloth. Then, I'm going to go ahead and take some of these bore patches and a brass eyelet. Now, it's very important that when you're cleaning the weapon, you want to be pulling the material that you're using to clean through in the same direction that the bullet travels. So, once we place this in, we want to pull it from chamber to muzzle. I like to pull, not push, because when the barrel's really dirty inside, it can cause a lot of resistance, and you can get binding and actually break these rods. It's very important to note that whatever you're using, you always want to make sure you have a brass tip on it, preferably just an eyelet, before you place it in, even if you're swapping it out for one of the chamber brushes. So I'm going to go ahead and insert it through just like this, from muzzle to chamber. So there we go, it's extended through. Now, got my cleaning solvent there. And I'm going to go ahead and take the patch, and I like to have it fuzzy side out, kind of particular. And I do it point facing back towards the barrel. Just like that. So I pulled it through. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and dip it into the cap. And I want this good and sloppy wet right now. What I'm going to do is an initial pull through the barrel to get some of this copper solvent soaking in there. There we go. And we can see some of that in there. And I'm actually going to do this one more time because I want to get it good and wet. This is probably the most important part of cleaning your weapon, is maintaining this barrel. If your barrel gets shot out, you're not going to have any accuracy. There we go. Now I'll go ahead and take that off. Now, if my barrel's really dirty and it's been neglected, I may let this sit. But mine's a little cleaner, so I'm going to go ahead and transition to the brush. So I've still got the eyelet on, and I'm going to go ahead and push it through the barrel, through the other end. Now once it's here, I unscrew it, and screw on the brush. Now this is an extra step and it's time consuming, but I'm just staying safe so that I don't damage any of the lands and grooves. Now if I want to, I can go ahead and get some of this solvent on the brush too. So I'm keeping it good and wet. Grasp and pull. You may notice when you're pulling these rods through, they spin freely. They're designed to do that. That'll kind of let you feel the lands and grooves because it's going to impart spin on this brush. Alright, so you're going to feel it spin as you pull it through. Let's go ahead and do that one more time. Actually, my gloves are just getting a little slippery, so I'm going to get some leverage on this. It's always great to have some tools on hand. And I'm going to place my eyelet back on. I don't have to thread it back on all the way. And push it through. Swap back to my brush. And let's pull it through again. There we go. Perfect. Now, we're just going to use the patches. So I'm going to place the eyelet back on. And this is going to be the most time-consuming part of cleaning your weapon. There we go. Thread it back on. Push it through. Set our eyelet. Just for good measure, I'm going to do one more wet pass. There we go. That's really breaking up some of that. Put it back through again. Now I'm going to start going dry. Now, you might ask, how many times am I going to do this? Well, I'm going to do this until I stop seeing dirt on the patches, honestly. There's a lot of places on this weapon where I'll accept a little bit of dirt, where it may actually even function a little better with some dirt. The barrel's not one of them. You really want this to be clean, because dirt in the lands and grooves is really going to decrease the life of your barrel. So I'm just going to continue pulling this through until they're nice and clean. There we go. That's looking a lot better. Now, if you're still getting a lot of buildup, you may want to go ahead and do a wet patch again. Do a couple wet patches, move back to a brush. Just keep going through the process until you get all of that built out of there. There's also some other neat products like some foaming bore snakes that you actually spray through there that work pretty well. Just experiment with what works best for you and don't be afraid to check reviews. Now, we've generated some oily rags, so just make sure you dispose of these properly and in accordance with your local regulations. There's a lot of hardware stores that will take oily rags. Your recycling center or landfill will. Make sure you don't put your contaminated cleaner back into there. You saw I just wiped it out, so there's nothing else. And I'm going to go ahead and place it back on. Now, I'm done with this, so I'm going to place it off to the side. Now, don't forget, don't neglect your magazines. These are pretty easy to clean. Like I said, I use these H&K steel ones. They work really great. There's nothing wrong with blowing these out with an air compressor or using some parts cleaner to spray in there. You can also take these apart if you want to. Just follow your manufacturer's recommendations for the type of magazines that you are using. If you're using plastic parts, you may not want to use solvents on them. So if you're using plastic magazines, make sure you refer to your manufacturer before introducing any kind of solvents to it. Now, exterior-wise, I can just rub this down with a brush or a paint brush if there's any dirt on here. I'm going to pay close attention to the sights and make sure that there's no dirt or debris. I'm not seeing any kind of rust or anything. And this is a good time to check your bolt tightness too. Check around, make sure there's nothing loose here. And we're looking pretty good. Now, let's move back to the center of the weapon. And what I want to do is I want to get this chamber good and clear now. So I'm going to go ahead and take my chamber brush. And I'm going to fully insert it. Now what I want to see is I want to see these steel bristles seated all the way into the star chamber. And I'm just going to sit here and turn it, just to break loose this material. That's going to make sure that the chamber, the throat, and the star chamber is free of any debris, and I'm not going to have any problems with half feeds, failure to extract, or anything like that. Then I can put this down. Now I'm going to take the plastic GI issue brush, and I'm going to place it right in the rail where the charging handle goes. It almost looks like it's made to go there. Well, that's because it is. And I'm just going to go ahead and throw it back and forth. I want those areas to be nice and clear all the way through where the bolt carrier rides. And I'm going to go ahead and brush off my dust cover and make sure that's functioning nice and well. There we go. And that's looking pretty good. Now that I've loosened that up, I'm going to go ahead and bring my parts cleaner tray back over here. Just a regular paint tray. I'm going to get my cleaner again. And I'm just going to spray it loose. There we go. Now, if you're not going to use parts cleaner on the chamber, you may want to swap up the order you do that. You may want to go ahead and take your chamber brush and clean your chamber brush first, and then rod your barrel. That way you're not getting any debris pushed back into the barrel after you're done. But I am using parts cleaner, so this is going to pretty much blow out all of that material. There we go. Now, I'm going to go ahead and divert my attention back to the parts that are broken here. I give them a little quick blast. I'm going to pay special attention here to the release latch. That should move freely. If you feel some grit in here, you may want to blast it again, or take some of the pipe cleaners in here. And then I'm just going to go ahead and set that down. I'm going to take this rag away so that I have somewhere to set these on. There we go. Let's put that on a magnetic mat. Now, onto the bolt carrier here. You do get a lot of carbon buildup, And yes, I know that for the most part, there's so much pressure that's involved in the weapons firing process that a lot of the carbon plating, when it builds up enough, it will break off. However, you know, I like to stay a little disciplined and like to clean it. It doesn't mean I take dental tools and get down in here and really scrape it. I'm just going to take a brass brush. It's not going to damage anything. And I'm going to stick it down in here and turn it. Pull it out. Do it the other way. Again, I'm not doing anything here that's going to damage the weapon. And notice I'm turning in a clockwise manner because that's the way it threads. If I turn this counterclockwise and pull, it's going to unthread. There we go. Give it a little blast. Yeah. See a lot of that black stuff coming off. A clean weapon is a happy weapon. Now, I'm going to take some pipe cleaners. Now, yes, I know there's enough pressure going through this gas key that it will break loose some buildup. However, I have seen debris lodge in here enough so that it actually clogs this port and basically turns your weapon into a bolt-operated weapon. Now, I don't want to use Q-tips. Never use Q-tips on this because the cotton can get stuck down in here and it's very difficult to get out. I'm just going to use these pipe cleaners. I'm going to stick it in here all the way, and you'll actually see it extend through the inside. I'm just going to move it back and forth. See when I get a little bit of buildup come out. And again, there we go, a little blast. Set it down to dry out. Now, I'm onto the bolt. Let's clear loose some of this stuff. Now, the first item I'm going to take to this is my plastic brush. And I'm going to go to the bolt face. And I want to make sure that the bolt face is nice and clear of any debris. I'm also going to take the small tip and press down on the ejector. That's the plunger looking rod that's in the front of the bolt face. I should be able to press it down and it should move smoothly. And then inside here where the extractor sits, give that a good rub along the locking lugs. This JP bolt that I'm using is really nice. It doesn't hold carbon too much. Now, on this front portion is really where you're going to see a lot of carbon buildup. Now, you may choose to let this soak a little bit. I'm just going to go ahead and move over to my brass brush. Note, I don't like to use my chamber brushes for this. They're for my chamber. If I use them for this, they're going to wear down and flatten a lot faster. So I'm going to use this. There we go. And that's breaking that up nicely now. Generally, I don't stick with this until I can eat off of it. I just like to get the majority of the plating off. The more often you clean it, the cleaner it'll be. That's it. Give it a little blast. Set it back down. Firing pin. The only thing that touches my firing pin is this, the plastic brush. I like to keep this nice and easy. If I do get carbon buildup in here, this is something that I will just let soak longer. There we go. When we get into the small parts, I'm really careful about how much I spray these. I don't like them to go flying across the floor. So I'm just going to give them a little brush. Now, the extractor. Okay, I want to pay special close to the inside portion where you see this groove. This is the groove that actually grips the back rim of the round to pull it out. You can get buildup in here, and you can get failure to extract. So I want to make sure that's good and clean. Then I'm going to give it a general rub down. I also want to inspect the spring. On most of these springs, you'll have a little rubber elastometer in the middle. Usually it's a check that a lot of times the spring can get compressed and it will actually set lower than that elastometer. That's usually a safety check. Once it gets to that point, it's usually worn out. If you have any questions about that, just refer to your manufacturer or the manual. These pins, there's really nothing you need to do with these. We're just going to inspect these for damage, and they just look fine. Okay, now we're done with our parts tray, so I'm going to set this off to the side. Now, for the next section, we're going to go ahead and move into lubing the weapon, and then finally putting it back together.